Tonight, my guest says, if you've been asking, where's my bail, here it is. How much debt are you carrying on credit cards? If you want to hear an expert talk about how to reduce your credit card debt, Kenny Golde, welcome to Business Beat Live to tell us all about it.
Thank you very much for having me.
Tell us your story, how you accumulated a massive amount of credit card debt, got out from under, and saved a ton of money in the process.
Yeah, my story. It's quite a story. As you mentioned, I am a filmmaker. About 2 years ago, in the spring of 2007, I was directing a film called Uncross the Stars. I had an investor, a friend of mine, a private individual who financed the film. And while we were shooting, he became ill and subsequently, and very sadly, passed away, leaving me to finish the financing of the film to the tune of about $250,000, which I never anticipated to have to spend and didn't have. I put over $200,000, to be precise, $212,000 of that on credit cards, and had the intent of finishing the film, selling the film. I'd been a filmmaker for 15 years. I'd done this 8 times before and had every reason to believe that we would sell the film and I would pay off that debt. And during the post...
That was the plan, of course.
That was the plan.
Kind of like a business plan.
Exactly, that was the business plan, exactly. That was the... Things have changed.
The well-calculated business plan.
Exactly. Not calculating for my friends passing away. Make money, pay off money. Then as we were editing the film, like those 6 to 8 months were the months where the housing market collapsed, the credit market collapsed, the economy collapsed. I think we had our screening for buyers the day the Federal Reserve bought Bear Stearns, and headlines all over the country where banks were going belly up.
Couldn't pick a better day.
Couldn't pick a better day. Half the people didn't come. The other half didn't have any money anymore. And the film didn't sell. And I was paying nearly $4,000 a month in interest to service those credit cards, in addition to my own personal expenses, my mortgage.
What sort of rates were you paying at that point?
Oh, it varied. I had 7 different cards, business lines of credit and personal lines of credit with 6 different banks, so it was everywhere from 7 or 8% up to 19 or 20% at the time. And I finally had to look at this as, well, the plan isn't working, as so many people today who have been in their own businesses or their own employment situations for 10, 20, 30 years, and they're looking at the current economy and saying, what I've been doing for most of my life isn't working anymore, and you have to look at something new.
Well, you know, it's interesting, just to interject this for a moment, Kenny. On the back of the book, the phrase that I read earlier at the start of the show, if you've been asking, where's my bailout? One of the big things that's been going on in our society the last few months is people are asking, vis-a-vis the small business person, well, where's my bailout? We bailed out GM, Chrysler, we bailed out this company, that company, the big guys, but how about the little guys?
I visited a bankruptcy attorney, and he told me about some of my options. He explained bankruptcy to me, and one of the options that he explained to me was this process called debt settlement. Now, this is about 1.5 years ago. Now we hear newspaper, radio, and television advertisements for it all the time. But in early 2007, 2008, I'd never heard of it before. Like, so how does this work? He says, well, you call up your credit card companies and you say, I'm not going to be able to pay off this balance, but I have a certain amount of money. Can we negotiate a settlement that's less than what I owe to pay off the entire balance up front?
Now, does this work successfully? Simply talking with somebody over the phone vis-a-vis when you're dealing with an attorney, for example, you're face-to-face. I'm the attorney, you're the client, you're sitting across the table, we're talking face-to-face and coming to some sort of a workable plan. When you're on the phone, of course, you may be talking with Mary Smith, who's in San Juan, for example, or she might be out in San Francisco, wherever it might be.
Yeah, I went through a lot of that, and I describe it at length in the book, and we can talk about it today. I had phone calls to people who could help me, phone calls to people who couldn't help me, phone calls
Was it couldn't or wouldn't or both?
No, there was never a wouldn't. Pretty much every credit card that I had that I approached and said, I'd like to do a settlement, at some point was amenable to doing that. And I learned a lot about the process as well. I learned about,
Those 7 or 8 credit cards, one would assume you did learn quite a bit.
I did. Part of what really inspired me to write the book was noticing how similar all of these different banks were in the settlement process. The people that I was on the phone with, it was almost scripted, and I started to recognize the same responses at the same time frame with different companies. And
I'm sure you weren't the only one that was calling, and probably they pretty much could script it, one would think.
Exactly.
Same questions, almost the same answers, and probably following about the same order.
Exactly. So it's called the do-it-yourself bailout because when my attorney told me about it, I went to see if I could find some information on this debt settlement thing, and I really couldn't find any at the time 18 months ago. A couple of websites with 2 or 3 bullet points, no books, no deeper information, a few companies who said, were trying to tell me that I couldn't do it because it was too complicated and too difficult. But if I paid them, they would do it for me, and I didn't really feel comfortable
Always a
doing
great
that.
sales pitch.
Exactly.
You can't do it, but
You
we
can't do it,
can,
but
so
we can
fork over
for
a ton
you.
of money and we'll help you out.
And that's a lot of the advertising you still hear on the radio and on television. Companies who say debt settlement is a complicated process and you won't do as well for yourself if you try it yourself. You need to know the ins and outs. Pay us and we'll do it for you.
Well, it's very similar to people that are having tax problems in this day and age. There's ads all over the internet, ads all over television, whatever, you know. If you owe more than $15,000, give us a call.
Give us a call.
I saw one advertised the other day. Somebody owed over $200,000. They settled for $40,000.
God bless
I'd like to know the details.
You should have them on the show.
It's not quite as easy as that.
Well, that's about where I went. My overall debt was $212,000, and by the time I was done, I still currently owe $30,000. But that $187,000 that I settled out only cost me $67,000. I settled everything for about a third and had $115,000 in debt written off entirely.
Now, when you approached these people, and you said there was like 6 or 7 different cards, did they ask you how you got into this? What were the circumstances?
Absolutely.
In other words, what type of employment did you have? Did you work for somebody else? Were you self-employed? Was it this? Was it that?
So that was definitely part of the process. The very first thing that my attorney said to me is if you want to go down the road of debt settlement, if you, after looking at all of your financial options, decide that this is one that might be right for you, the first thing you need to do, which is bizarre to me but is the case, is you have to start missing a few credit card payments. Because the banks, the credit card companies, have indicated through their actions that they're not interested in talking about settlement with people who are current on their payments because they'd rather have you just keep staying current on your payments. So
Because if you fall behind on the payments, now you're incurring late fees and that fee and this fee, and
that's true.
it's actually building rather than being reduced.
That's true, but all of that was negotiable as well. As part of the negotiations, I was able to say, I want you to take off this interest and these late fees in addition to the percentage that was all negotiable. The biggest question that I think most people come up against when they hear stop making a credit card payment is, what's that going to do to my credit score? We have this massive emotional identity attachment to our credit scores. And we put identity into a lot of things. We, as Americans, we put identity in the type of home we live in, the type of car we drive, the clothes we wear, what our employment is, how much money we make, how much money we have in the bank. We attach identity to a lot of material things and non-material things. We attach identity to our children and our sporting events. And we attach identity to our credit score. And people really question whether or not it's right to stop making credit card payments in order to settle a credit card debt if it's going to affect their credit score. And what I try and look at is a larger picture. I try and say, your credit score is one element of your whole financial picture. It's not the only element of your whole financial picture. And if you can settle out $10, $20, $30, $40, $50,000 in credit card debt, and in doing that, take a 100-point hit on your credit score that's going to cost you $1,000 or $2,000 over 5 years the next time you buy a car, I think that's a good financial decision. So I'd say to people, look at the whole picture when it comes to debt settlement, not just the emotional attachment we have to this thing called a credit score.